Oh, welcome to the New England Endurance Podcast. I'm your host, Art Trapotsis, along with my stylish colleague, Eric Schenker. Eric, we have a huge episode today. This is our first episode where we interview folks from the great state of Connecticut and learn what's going on in that state, especially from a cycling perspective. And who better to tell the story than the incredible Wolfe brothers? We have Ben and Brian Wolfe in the house. Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks for having us, man. It's exciting.
No, we've been waiting for electricity to actually make its way to Connecticut, and now we're able, and Wi-Fi. So the fact these guys used an AOL dial-up to get on, so we apologize if the connection isn't bad, but I think there's a lot of civilization finally making its way down to Connecticut. As you may know from previous episodes, we have some fun love that we give to Connecticut, and we've been really actually excited to have you guys on and really start to explore in more detail the endurance community of Connecticut. So let's start with Brian. Brian Wolfe is the executive director of a very cool organization we were introduced to called the Connecticut Cycling Advancement Program, or CCAP. Brian's primary focus is to develop CCAP as a premier youth cycling organization in the country. I love that ambition. Brian has ridden bikes most of his life, started racing BMX at a younger age. BMX was super cool in the Olympics, so maybe we'll touch on that at some point. And after college at UConn, transitioning into road and mountain bike riding, Brian realized the importance of giving kids across the state access to this lifelong sport.
Wow. This program sounds like an incredible opportunity for the youth of Connecticut who want to get into cycling. Please allow me to introduce the other Wolfe brother now, Ben Wolfe. He's the senior coach at Charles Coaching and Nutrition Services, CCNS. He brings over 10 years of racing experience at the international level. With a passion for endurance sports and athlete development, Ben uses a data-driven approach to help athletes reach their full potential. I'm a data geek, so I love that Ben's doing that. He's also actively involved with his brother Brian at the CCAP. Guys, this is really cool. Before we dig into CCAP, Ben, what pro team did you race for internationally?
I raced for Jelly Belly and then the USA national team and Cal Giant as U23 teams, and then went back to Jelly Belly, then Hincappy. And then after the pandemic, raced kind of more of the local or national crit calendar with Best Buddies over a couple of years, and then kind of stopped racing full-time professionally. Well, in 2019 is when I kind of stopped full-time, but then kind of part-time nationally just this past year.
Oh, very good. And rumor has it that your FTP is still 400 watts plus. Is that true?
I like to think it is still there now. It's been a little bit of time since I've tried to go all in for one of those efforts. I'm still recovering from the PTSD, I guess.
I would guess it's like 4 or 5 at least. You have to give them a few watts on top of that.
Did you guys get unlimited jelly beans when you were on the team?
We would get, I think it was like something ridiculous. Like it was like 70 pounds of jelly beans shipped to our house every quarter. So like, what? I mean, it was
being bashful. It was a pallet.
It was a pallet of jelly beans and just Jelly Belly product in general. But I mean, I'm sure there's still some in my mom's attic and at my buddies' houses. It was just too much to eat.
That's so great. Did you have a favorite flavor?
Honestly, I was kind of a animal with it. I would just pour the entire bag into my hand and just put it all in and just mesh them together. But so there's no specific one. I just really didn't like the licorice one. Was just a no-go.
Yeah. Great kits. Those were always great kits. Very iconic. Loved seeing them. Probably like the 7-Eleven and Jelly Belly would be the sort of like the two iconic kits I would put side by side. Maybe that's just because when we were out there racing, that was the team, the domestic team that everybody
still gets remembered for sure. We have some coaches that are like, "Hey, remember Ben used to race for Jelly Belly?" I was like, "Yeah, I won't forget it."
Yeah,
and they weren't even in the road scene or anything.
It was a really cool sponsorship, and I was happy to be part of it. And for it to last 19 years in cycling is it's truly impressive.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's incredible.
maybe we focus too much on jelly beans, but before we get into CCAP, Ben, what was maybe one of your most memorable racing experiences from all your years racing domestically and international?
I mean, there was so many of other experiences in various ways, but I would have to think 2017 Tour of California, when it was a kind of a world tour race. I got the most combative rider 2 days, not in a row. It was stage
nice.
1 and stage 3. And that was one of those years where Jelly Belly sponsorship was kind of teetering and they needed us to do something big. So I figured I'd go into the break and go for it. And certainly went for it, but, was awarded the biggest dunce cap award at the end of the day, which is tried the hardest to not win, but it still was very memorable just because, it's a high level race and on the camera and having some fun.
Yeah, there's some good video footage of that.
Biggest dunce cap award. I haven't heard to it referred to that way, but I really appreciate that. Yeah. Brian, how about yourself? I know you were also a racer. Any good racing memories from your side?
Not at the professional. I'm more of like, local amateur racer status. Honestly, one of my best memories was probably racing with Ben at Ninigret in 2021 when I was pretty fit at that point. And also thinking about FTP was around 400 there, but I'm not there anymore. And racing with him was a ton of fun and seeing his craft and his tactics. But probably most memorable was when I was a junior winning Jamestown Classic back when it used to be an actual race.
Ooh. That's a big one.
Love Jamestown. That's where I met my wife. It used to be a stage race back in 2000. It was 3-event stage race over 2 days.
Wow.
That was before your time.
Well, when we first started as juniors, that was the pro race was 100 miles. It was 5 laps of the island or something. And there would be huge fields. And then it kind of just teetered off, which was unfortunate. But it was a fun end of the season, go around the island there, especially when it was windy.
There was a heyday of some really cool races around New England that just aren't around anymore. I don't even you just mentioned stage race, and I think about Working Man Stage Race. That was always a fun one. And I remember we did an interview with Karen Smyers, and she talked about all these amazing triathlons that used to be in New England, and those are some really fun days of racing here. In New England.
I'll say that thanks to CCAP, there's still a bunch of great events in Connecticut going on. A lot of fun.
Very good segue.
If you guys do come out of your North Shore, Massachusetts hermit shell, that's where you guys live in, right?
It's more of a bubble. We like to think of it more of a bubble. The air is a little cleaner, the water, things like that. The sun is always shining, but sure, from time to time we leave the bubble.
If you come down, there's a lot of fun races for sure. We brought Tokenique back this year, so that's a classic Connecticut road race. Yeah, a lot of fun. Good turnout this year, and looking forward to bringing it back again next year.
Yeah, so Brian, can you tell us a bit about the Connecticut Cycling Advancement Program and sort of the mission of the organization?
Yeah, so our primary mission is to give kids and families access and exposure across Connecticut and generally just sort of the Northeast, access and exposure to the sport of cycling. And so that looks like a bunch of different things. The primary part of it is creating school clubs and regional teams for these kids to be a part of and having an atmosphere that they want to go to and want to join, and having friends that they can practice with and race with, and and influential and important coaches that can help shape them and their experience when it comes to competition and the team environment and the character building that comes along with that. But we also host events as well. So to kind of keep that structure going, because like you guys mentioned earlier, a lot of the races have gone away and it's tough to find promoters and clubs that want to take on such an effort. There's some great clubs in Connecticut that do that as well, but we're a big part of that. And making those events happen and having all of them have a youth specific component to it. And what I mean by that is youth specific categories. So we have our junior categories there, as well as some adult categories too, which is a cool structure for it, because the kids love to see their family members and their parents and their coaches and everyone race. So it's a really cool environment to be a part of. So that between the teams and the events, we also put on summer camps as well. So we do a 4-day overnight summer road and mountain bike camp up at UConn. And we also do the 2-day weekend cyclocross camp. So kind of focusing on those 3 primary disciplines. It's all about just getting kids on bikes and getting them involved with those.
What ages are you working with?
So our age group is 9 to 18.
And, is there a league that you've sort of formed amongst the high schools in the area or the junior highs that people can compete in?
Absolutely, yeah. We put on a combination of different series and races that they can all be a part of.
So I'm thinking like up here, what is it? The Nesca, right? Is that, do you guys like, is it mountain bike as well? And are you in the Nesca organization?
Yeah, so yeah, that's NEYC there. And we're not. We sort of have our own league as well, where we put on
Okay.
and partner with other clubs that put on races to promote our youth series
Okay.
for CCAP kids. It's road, it's mountain bike, it's cyclocross. We have all three of
Oh,
those.
that's amazing. And so you said nine to 18. So 9-year-olds are so you're talking middle school all the way up through high school.
Yep, exactly.
Right. And you're going into the schools, and the schools will, form a road bike team, or you'll help those schools organize, give them the toolbox, I guess you could say, to have an actual high school team that may be adjacent to one of the other sort of endurance, or team sports.
Exactly. So creating like a club, like similar to what like an after school like soccer team would be, and usually generally it's for mountain bike. That's sort of like the easiest entry point into the sport. A lot of the bikes that kids have are mountain bikes, and it's a little bit safer. It's well, debatable there, but like it's off road. It's not in front of cars and whatnot. So that seems to be the easiest sort of entry point. And so yeah, we'll help them with that toolbox. We'll help organize events to make this stuff happen, but we also provide coaching support in terms of like training. So things like that, jerseys, general structure, and kind of like, all right, this is how you start a team. These are the starting points. These are the steps you have to go through. These are the things to consider and all that. So we kind of help support them in that way, along with bike grants and cash grants as well.
I think that's something I think that has come up a couple times in some of our podcasts with other organizations that are trying to start these, and the toolbox, right? I very specifically used that terminology because I think could be even one of the biggest barriers to entry, right? Is how do I actually go about starting this? What do I need to consider? So the fact that you guys are providing that toolbox, it's sort of reminiscent of, we interviewed a rowing program, and the same thing, that they're just giving their, here's the toolbox for you to go set this up in your town locally, or all the way across the country. So I think that's an amazing thing that you are doing, and certainly growing the endurance community from the scholastic level is huge. How did Brian, I'll start with you. How did you get involved with CCAP, or did you guys start the program, or is it just something that you guys got into with your cycling background and are now all in?
So yeah, it started in 2013. It was founded by Aiden Charles and CCNS, and Ben was a big part of that as well. I got involved with it through Ben, of course, but volunteering back when it had started. And then around 2016, I majored in sport management at UConn, and I was looking for an internship and had reached out to Aiden and got started there. I volunteered at numerous CCAP events before that, so I kind of had an understanding of what they did and got involved as an intern, and loved it. It was a great way to like experience sport, and great way to like spend your day. And if that's what you're doing for a job, it's amazing. And from there, just kind of developed and kept working at it, and eventually they offered me a full-time position, and kind of worked my way through it from there.
How many high schools, or just schools in general, are involved now?
A few high schools. There's 6 or 7 middle schools that are involved, and they ebb and flow a little bit without getting too much of the challenges. Coach recruitment and stuff like that can be a challenge for certain things, but overall we have about 30 clubs, including 30 different teams.
Does that mean you also have like sort of 30 coaches or volunteer parents as well helping out?
Right. We have a lot of coaches. So we have a lot of great, phenomenal coaches. And I want to say there's about 85 in total between head coaches and assistant coaches. There's a bunch of family members that help out as well. There's like part-time assistant coaches and some really incredible, dedicated, and selfless head coaches that run these teams.
So with 30 teams, about how many kids are we talking about?
Throughout the whole year between the 3 different seasons, right? Because they're sort of separated, like spring mountain bike, summer road, fall cyclocross. We have about 350 total kids.
Wow, that's a really cool little ecosystem you guys have, contributed to down there. Ben, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing, I guess, like young athletes, or in your case, young cyclists, and how does CCAP, help overcome those obstacles?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is exposure to the sport. We grew up in a very small part of Connecticut that we like to call the Limes, Old Lyme, Lyme, and East Lyme. And that's where, Jeremy Powers came from, Ken Avery, Tom Danielson. So it was this unique little neck of the woods down here on the eastern side of the river, so more New England than the western side. But that we had access to sport and learned that it was an option. We didn't have to just do the typical ball high school sports. And I see that as the benefit of the CCAP. Getting in front of kids and showing them that hey, there's this awesome sport that can take you cool places. And not only can it double as a sport, but a mode of transportation in some of like the kind of more inner city places. Like if kids can get on a bike, they can like really broaden their opportunities, not even just in sport. So, I think the biggest barrier is just getting in front of kids and letting them know that, hey, this is a real sport that you can like kind of take places and, adventure a little bit as well.
So if a kid says, "Hey, I really want to try this cycling. I don't have a bike. How do I do this, Ben?"
I mean, honestly, what I would do is I'd put them in touch with Brian and Greg here at the CCAP, and they would, there's a basement kind of bikes that we can loan out and kind of get kids on a bike.
Oh, cool.
And like Brian said, it's a mountain bike kind of at first, just because it is the most versatile bike. I mean, you can go off road, on road. You may not be able to do a road bike race, but you can at least get the experience of how to ride a bike, how to shift, get all those basics down, because that's, kind of one of the other big things too, is most kids have a BMX bike to start. And that's how, frankly, we started. But having a bike with gears and a little bit bigger tires and all of that is kind of that next level up. So the CCAP can kind of hook them up with that. And then it's about finding them a community to be involved with, because, even though cycling is more of a, kind of solo sport in theory, it's very much a team sport when you watch any of the bigger races. And, it's a big support network needed there. And, that's what the CCAP has laid out, is that support network for kids who want to get in, like, kind of involved in cycling, to have, whether it's a high school team, a local team, a regional team, to kind of like get that exposure, but also have that community. Because I think for anyone who's ridden a bike realizes that there's a learning curve, especially when you get into kind of the races with the nuances of, pack dynamics, all of these little things that are kind of scary when you're the first one out. Cycling has not always been the most inclusive sport. So you roll up and you see guys in spandex with shaved legs and all of this stuff, and you can be intimidated. So giving them access to a community that kind of is at their level to bring them up from the grassroots side of things is crucial, absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
There's a changing tide in cycling in that respect. And what I mean by that is so many of the clubs that we have interviewed are so welcoming and have no drop rides and what have you, right? So I do think that we are in a bit of a new era of that cycling world, and maybe that's because there is maybe less racing, right? Like, I don't know, like less races is lending itself to more inclusive, just jovial, good time riding together, putting the hammer down when you can, but no drop opportunities. So I'm glad to hear that that's part of the culture that you guys are trying to promote. Maybe a segue to that is, and I'm stealing one of your questions, Art, but what do you think this sort of youth cycling, what does that role play in the larger endurance ecosystem, particularly in New England?
Well, I mean, I think what we're seeing is a lot of the endurance scene in New England specifically is an older generation. And we need kind of that young blood to come in and kind of force some sort of a change. Like you're saying, a little bit more inclusion, kind of the no drop rides, whether that's racing side of things or just enjoying the event or enjoying, the time on the bike. So I think that that's, kind of one of the more important things there, Brian.
Yeah, I think it's a really important part, because it kind of grows it from the bottom up, and you start introducing as many kids as possible to this, and some will stick. And even if it's only for, say, through their middle school years, and then they step away, but they come back to it later in life, they still have some of that experience and that, like, that love for the sport. And it produces a love for the sport at a younger age, and realizing that like one of the themes that we go to is like, hey, this is a lifelong sport. So you can do it, and you can do it competitively for a number of years, and you can race as a junior, and then you can drop it if you want and come back to it. Like you don't have to necessarily
Oh,
do it all the
absolutely.
way through. And it's a beautiful thing about cycling as it's compared to like, football, basketball, baseball. There's not many of us, if any, that even play past the high school level. And then it gets even farther once you get past collegiate level. And cycling is a little bit different. And you can make so many different things of it. I mean, Ben mentioned it as a mode of transportation. It's a sport. It's a hobby. People just go out there to ride for like pure enjoyment and fun and just spend time riding around. And it's not about numbers. It's not about racing. It's fun.
If I'm a parent, I want to get my kid involved. How do I find you guys?
Of course, yeah. You can find us through social media or going to our website. You can look up ctbikes.org or Connecticut Cycling Advancement Program. And there's a number of great ways to get involved. You can coach a team, even with somewhat limited experience. We help onboard and teach you how to coach and how to structure a team and whatnot. There's also just signing your kid up for one of the local regional teams and participating in that way. And maybe you eventually develop into wanting to help out. But there's volunteering at events. There's also like donations and sponsorship, which is a lot of how we fund this program. So there's a number of different ways to get involved. But I would encourage you to visit our website or reach out through social media, and we can connect you if you have a kid that's interested.
Is there a list of regional teams?
There is.
And do they have cool names? The high school teams.
They totally vary. There's some that have gone with maybe a little bit more like laid back high school name and mascot, and then there's others that have gone with a mix of a few different things. We've got some good ones like Waldo Warriors, who are out in the the western part of the state, and they practice at Waldo State Park. There's the Wheelie Warriors up in Tolland area, and we have Rocklandia Rad and Nar, which is definitely one of my favorite ones. Who's kind of in the Guilford, Durham, Middlesex County area.
Ben, this question is for you. How important is it for youth athletes to have access to proper coaching and mentorship early in development? I'm sure maybe you did, maybe you didn't have that, but how does that set them on a path for success? And certainly from what CCAP is helping to provide.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had that. I had a community around me that like was able to help kind of like guide me, because cycling and sport in general, there's a lot of life lessons learned, especially kind of for a youth rider. Like you learn the importance of teamwork, hard work, dedication, all of these things that you can kind of take through life into whatever you do. So having kind of proper guidance, not even on like the physiological training side, but also kind of like the mental and emotional side of how you kind of roll with the punches, and when you hit those roadblocks, how to kind of work around them. I think that's becoming more and more important in youth sports, because there's so much access to, whether it's social media or just news in general about, they always pick the person who's the best and just highlight what they do. And I think it gives like, especially youth who are kind of easily, molded there, gives them this unrealistic kind of like goal and how trajectory of the sport and how it's going to go. So to kind of have someone in the background and a second pair of eyes to help kind of guide them through the good times and also the bad times to keep them moving forward is a way that, you develop not only good athletes, but also good people. I think there's no shortcuts to success, and, sport and cycling are no different there.
Do you have any cool success stories of youth cyclists that have come through your program and gone on to achieve modest success or great success? I mean, maybe there's some standouts that, and I'm not necessarily particular about the fastest kids, but like, are there any just cool stories of kids that benefit from the CCAP program?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. We got a long list of them for sure, and a lot of different ones. We have different paths. Like we have a kid who's named Lucas Huseman, who was part of CCAP from a very young age, came out to our summer road camp back when he was, I want to say like 11 or 12. And he fell in love with the sport from then, and he's racing currently at Colorado State. He's helped put on events. He's came back and helped us put on events and be a role model for some of the other kids in the program. We also have David Thompson, was an early CCAPper for a while. David Thompson raced with AG2R, the World Tour team, did a bunch of cyclocross stuff, and that was one of his his best attributes is his cyclocross, and he's a phenomenal kid as well. And he's come back and help as well. He was the 17-18 national champion last year, the U23 Pan Am champion, very successful rider. And he went through our program and then went to a couple other development programs along the way, and continues to give back and want to be a part of what we do. And there's others that have graduated from CCAP and not necessarily stayed in the sport, but are still doing phenomenal things with their lives and are like active parts of the community and doing a bunch of different things. So it does promote good character.
That must feel great to see those kids succeed in athletics and school and business in the future. And I think you guys should be proud that you played a part in that. That must be very fulfilling for you guys with the organization.
For sure. Even if it is a small part.
So when you play like on a varsity, let's say basketball or football team, sometimes the coach would have you do, a 1 mile test, and you got to finish it below 7 minutes or something. Are your teams doing similar sort of tests for the athletes? I guess at the high school level, maybe it's an FTP test or something. Like, are you introducing that to those athletes at that age yet?
It's very dependent on the athlete themselves and what their desire is to compete with things. We don't try to push it at too young of an age because there's also the worry about you see, you get back to like little league and burnout and little league parents that are like super, super invested and involved. And that's kind of what we try to steer away from in a certain extent.
Yeah.
So we focus on like the fun and the character building of it, while there's also is some like performance bits and pieces. And what we'll do a lot of times is like field test versions of those. We don't necessarily bring them into the lab to do any sort of like official VO2 max testing or anything. Some do. Some of the athletes that are like Ben coaches a couple of our juniors, and some of them will come in for that kind of testing if they're interested in more personalized coaching like that. And otherwise we'll do like, hill climb tests and things like that, 5-minute power tests and things along.
Well, the biggest thing with any of those things, whether it's their high school basketball coach doing a 1 mile or, these kids doing various hill repeat tests, I think is teaching the kid to learn about themselves and to kind of push limits and boundaries, and kind of see how far they can take it, not only kind of like physically, but also mentally and emotionally, and, not be afraid of failure. I think the biggest thing that, the CCAP tries to kind of instill in these kids is kind of like more of the growth mindset versus, a fixed mindset where it's okay to go out there and fail and not have your best day, but like, how are you going to pick yourself up and continue to kind of like learn from the experience you just had to progress yourself forward?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you just how do you balance, as a coach between the short-term performance goals versus the bigger picture, long-term athlete journey. And I think you just answered that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tricky balance, right? Especially again, and I'll kind of always come back to this just with social media and anything where, people want the fast track. They want their, the secret pill that's going to give them the results as quick as they can. But like Brian said, I mean, especially with youth athletes, if they want that fast track, we have to try to meet them in the middle of like a balance between, taking them into like the high level of sport that they want to be, but also making sure that they're balancing school and family and having a childhood and all of that. Because what we've seen and what I think has been a common theme across all sport is the kids who go all in are the ones that, like we say, burn out, or they just totally resent sport in general, or even worse, resent families who push them too much in that direction. So it's kind of, there's a balancing act there, of kind of meeting them in the middle and like having them understand that like, hey, we're working our way that way, but you also have to balance school and, chorus and all of these other things along with the sport. And that's going to make you a more well-rounded and balanced person. That's going to set you up for more success down the line.
I think it's huge because we talk so much about it in the adult phase of our lives. Like, how are we balancing trying to be endurance athletes and raise kids and be a present husband, a husband that's present and a dad that's present and be successful at work. So, I feel like I cut my teeth on time management and some of those things in college, being a college athlete, not so much at the high school level. So I probably would have really benefited from having a little bit of that mentorship, earlier on. But Ben, I think you mentioned, or Brian, you had said that Ben has a few kids that he's coaching individually. I assume that that's at probably trying to aspire to a little bit higher level of achievement. What are some of the ways you're coaching those youth? Is it very data driven? Is it very what is it, the RPE? Like, can you talk a little bit about your coaching style for some of the youth, and maybe how you would treat them differently than you would an older athlete that you might be coaching?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I mean, any way that we look at coaching, whether it's an adult athlete or a junior athlete, is we kind of call it the holy trinity of training monitoring. And it's, for cycling, it's, power, heart rate, and the RPE of the athlete. So we kind of try to triangulate these things together that we're...
I made a mistake. We're supposed to not use any acronyms. So RPE, do you want to talk a little bit about RPE?
Rate of perceived exertion. And honestly, with the youth athletes, that's kind of one of the more important things. And it depends on their age, right? Because I'm gonna work with a 13, 14-year-old kid way different than a 17, 18-year-old kid. Just because the maturity difference between a high school senior or a freshman and a high school senior is much more substantial than the difference between Brian and I at 29 and 31.
We're all a bunch of big kids.
We're all still kids, but you're going to kind of approach that differently. So with the junior athletes, I try, if they have access to a power meter, then we'll kind of use power sparingly, but a lot of it is kind of more based on the RPE and kind of again, trying to get them to understand how their bodies are feeling. Because when you're in any sport or any event or performance kind of oriented situation, you're not always going to have the time to look down at your bike computer or your watch and tell it, oh, can I go harder? When the attack's going up the road or when something's happening. So you kind of have to be able to kind of intrinsically choose whether or not you can do that based on the RPE. So a lot of the younger junior athletes, we call them the Cub juniors here, 13 through 16, if their parents have a power meter for them, fantastic. I will rely on kind of RPE and heart rate and use the power in the background. Whereas you get to more of a 17, 18-year-old. And, what we're seeing in cycling, and it's changed since I was a junior even, is, kids are going straight to the world tour on the highest level from juniors. They're kind of skipping over the U23. So, with those juniors, you have to be a little bit more performance oriented and kind of tangible targets and metrics in the training as opposed to the younger kids. So there's a little bit of a difference there depending on how they are. And frankly, there's no perfect training plan, right? You can write the perfect training plan, but if the athlete doesn't want to execute it or can't execute it, then what good is the perfect training plan? So I use, an acronym GROW with all athletes, but specifically the junior athletes. And the GROW is goal, reality, options, and will. So, we'll take the athlete and we'll sit down and talk to them about what their goals are. And then, through whether it's data collection and coming into the lab or frankly, just looking back through previous kind of results, we'll kind of get a realistic view of where they are now. And then kind of by tracing these things out, you have the reality here and the goal here. And then, so what options do we have to take them from that goal to the reality to the goal? And out of those options, what are they willing and able to do so that they get the most out of themselves and out of the kind of coach-athlete relationship?
The organization you're also a part of, which is the Charles Coaching and Nutrition Services. So am I getting a sense that provides sort of free services to the folks involved with CCAP, and then you also have a paying model for, let's say, masters athletes? Is that accurate?
So there's a discounted rate for any junior athletes. We have 2 levels of coaching plans that we kind of offer, which is full, custom, and biweekly. And any junior athlete that comes, whether from the CCRP or not, is going to get the full custom level coaching. And then, at the price is one of those things where, we have a kind of a price, but it's kind of a case by case basis, depending on, what the kid is able to kind of put into the sport. Because we don't, I certainly don't want to leave any kid kind of behind, especially in cycling, because to find someone who loves cycling and is not going to get, their license and just, throw the bike in the garage and never touch it again is a big part. So if they have, whatever they kind of have access to is how we're going to kind of help, work with them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'd like to segue, Eric, to talk a little bit about New England. And, we have such a diverse landscape, especially for cycling. Do either of you, Ben or Brian, have a favorite place to ride in New England? I'm curious if there are any of these places exist in Connecticut. I know they do. I'm kidding there. But do you have any sort of, favorite places you like to ride, or hidden gem events that you encourage our listeners to attend or sign up for?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd have to say, I mean, when I raced professionally over the decade plus, traveling around, living in a bunch of different places, I'd have to say the River Valley of Connecticut, where Brian and I still live, down in Old Lyme, is probably my favorite place to ride. You have the beach; it's not flat. There's rolling hills, but there's low traffic. But really, kind of, I call it the kind of, it's almost, you could do a V in Connecticut. So like the northwest corner, the northeast corner, and then kind of the shoreline where we are, in the center of the state, is by far the best riding in Connecticut. There's low traffic, beautiful rolling hills. Where Richard Fries, who you had previously on the podcast, holds his events, for Notch Hog Epic and Lime Rock Epic. Those are both kind of the northeast and the northwest corners of Connecticut, and they are just, I mean, absolutely beautiful. I mean, northwest corner of Connecticut might as well be southern Vermont, as far as I'm concerned.
Any events that we should sign up for?
He's got a list of them.
What kind of events are you guys looking at? What do you fancy?
We're looking for a hidden gem. We're always looking for hidden gems, and we've learned about a ton of hidden gems, swimming races and running races and bike events. So give us something that the folks maybe haven't heard of, or something with a really great spectator or participation experience that you could recommend.
Okay, well, I got two good ones for you, two hidden gems. If you're looking for like a grassroots level hidden one, our Tuesday night crit series up at Rensselaer Field is phenomenal. Really fun atmosphere, good race fields. We do the A and B category as well as some junior categories, and on a weekly basis we'll host a junior practice there as well. And a ton of fun, low pressure, but just an incredible course and fun way to kind of throw down and let yourself loose on a weeknight. And it would be remiss to not mention the New Haven Grand Prix, which is one of the biggest events that we put on. It's a party with a bike race around it. Basically, it's a pizza party with a bike race around it, and you get some New Haven pizza. There's like over 40 vendors out there. There's 15 to 20,000 people in terms of spectators out and about right in downtown on a Friday night. There's junior races to pro races, almost 300 riders that came out this past year. And that is a growing hidden gem for sure.
That sounds awesome. It makes me want to get back into racing, Eric.
Honestly, you don't even have to race that one. Just to come out and like be in downtown and get some pizza and
to hang out.
If you guys ever remember back to the Athens Twilights, it's still happening, yes. But that's like that big, kind of crit down in Georgia. The New Haven is kind of New England's version of that. It would be like, they brought back Beverly this year, which is freaking awesome too. So kind of similar to that, just down here in Connecticut, where it's that like evening kind of party pizza vibe.
It's the best race in the Northeast for sure. And I'll include New Jersey and New York.
I think Connecticut definitely has a reputation for some incredible pizza. So I will.
Pretty sure we just were voted the Connecticut or the pizza capital of the world. I think we were just voted.
So I'm tipping the cap to Connecticut pizza. And while I'm feeling sort of sharing the love here for Connecticut, I'll ask you our final question. We ask this of all of our guests, and we've covered a lot today, and I've learned a lot about Connecticut, a lot of respect for Connecticut and what you guys are doing down there to develop, in particular, the youth cycling, which I just love, because I think the more kids we can get on bikes, it's what we need to be doing, so that not that the sport continues, but just that the kids can start to learn to love it at a younger age. And it's a life, like you said, I think Ben or Brian, one of you said it, that it's not a skill that's going to go away. So you guys are doing a great job, and I applaud everything that you're doing at CCAP. But tell me why you agree that New England is the greatest endurance region in the United States, if not the world.
There's so much variety to the landscape and the area that you can go down to the shoreline and have flat fun routes where you can have triathlons, and you can easily host mountain biking within like a 2-hour drive and have some of the best mountain biking. Like you can shoot up to Southern Vermont or Massachusetts and hit any of the bike parks. There's Maine, where you can like lose yourself into 800 miles of gravel roads and maybe end up in Canada. But there's just so much variety to it that I think New England's like truly special for just endurance sports in general.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I'd say like the diversity of the terrain and the accessibility of the locations. I mean, because you go out to Colorado and you can drive for 4 hours and still be in the same state, and frankly be in a worse part of the state. But anywhere in New England, if you drive 4 hours, you're going to find a location and like terrain that is going to push you and kind of develop more skills, around every corner.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you guys would like to plug or mention before we sign off from today's episode?
Outside of the fact that I think we got you guys to admit Connecticut's not awful, I think that's a huge win.
Absolutely.
Honestly, I appreciate the kind words too about all the hard stuff we do, but it honestly takes a huge community to do this. And like, I can't take all the credit. Like we have some amazing coaches that are super selfless and inspirational for the kids that really shape these team dynamics in this atmosphere and grow these kids. And like, we have great clubs in Connecticut as well, and just a solid community to make this all happen. So just want to obviously thank all of them. And of course our staff, Greg as well, who's behind us milling around the office, and interns and all the people that have
Hey,
Greg.
Greg.
In the past.
How can folks contribute to CCAP if they'd like to, in terms of monetary?
Yeah, you can, there's a donate button on our website, and you can also reach out through our contact page as well if you're interested in something a little bit more or something special that you want to do.
And we can find you guys at, I believe it's ctcyclingadvancement.org or charlescoaching.com. Brian, Ben, Wolfe, thank you so much for being on the New England Endurance Podcast and sharing your story with us. I love what you're doing with the Connecticut Cycling Advancement Program and the way you're coaching the youth. It's been incredible. We'll tag you guys on our Instagram page, which is New England Endurance.
And thanks to our all of our sponsors who help power this podcast. First of all, Lark Fine Foods, a 100% women-owned specialty food company, baking delicious small batch cookies, and they sell a lot of those cookies in Connecticut for sure. A lot of wine and cheese shops carry those cookies. You got The Everyday Athlete, a book about balancing work, family, and fitness, a must-read. And Kinetic, experience the brain-boosting benefits of ketones on demand at drinkkinetic.com. And until next time, get out there, rain or shine, explore the beautiful terrain of New England, which now officially includes Connecticut.
I love
Thanks,
it, guys.
guys.
Thank you.